We are Justin Gariano and Dusty Schaller. We are Heartbeats, a producer team, and this is Treehouse Recording, our recording studio.
So this is the viola mic, and this just kind of snugs right in under the fingerboard with the microphone element pointed back at the player. And then there's this neat little grommet right here that you can adjust, and so that it lets the cable fall off the instrument wherever you want it to. And then there's an XLR on the other end, and they give you a really good, nice amount of cable here that is long enough to reach the floor, whether you're sitting or standing. And then it's got this really cool cable here, and this cable is actually just fabric. It feels like a shoelace, so it's not going to bang against the instrument, and it's nice and quiet, and you can kind of wrap it wherever you need to. It's a really neat cable.
What I have here is the cello mic, and the reason that we're mentioning that that's a viola mic and this is a cello mic is because all the mics are actually instrument specific, that they're all made specifically for a certain instrument to get the sound, as we were saying, as captured of the player. I'm going to swing this in a bit closer in here so you can see this rests underneath the fingerboard right there as well. You have another little soft grommet right here that can slide underneath various parts of the instrument to hold the cable in place to get it up and out of the way. Again, it's like a shoelace that can reach the ground easily. Plenty of length on this thing. These are absolutely lightweight, out of the way, fantastic microphones that sound brilliant.
We absolutely love them. And all of our string players that we have in tend to gravitate towards them because they're hearing in playback what they hear while they're playing. It sounds like their instrument to them. And so it offers the string player a lot of confidence in the sound that they're getting, and it offers us a lot of confidence in the sound that we're getting because it sounds like the instrument and it doesn't sound like some facsimile of the audio source, because we're getting the true sound of the microphone and the true sound of the instrument instead of, the sound of the electronics from some other, mic.
Yeah, I mean, when we're recording any string section, we're hearing the instrument the way that they're hearing the instrument. So we know if it's not the microphone. If it's a good take, it's a good take, and it's not, oh, there's some technology that made it that way. It's exactly, they can play with confidence. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly how it's going to sound. We know that it sounds like what it sounds like in there, etc.
The artists really love how the microphone is mounted to the instrument. A lot of string players, they can be a bit touchy about what you put on their instrument, because their instruments are generally very expensive. They're wood, they're delicate, and the REMIC stays out of the way. It's soft. The cable attached to it is soft too, so you don't have a plastic XLR cable clanking against the body of their instrument or chairs or music stands or anything else like that. So it's quiet, it's out of the way, and they don't seem to mind having this tiny little mic mounted onto their instrument, because it just kind of snugs right in there and it's out of the way. And
yeah, it's not clipped on. It's not attached in any way that it looks like it could damage the instrument. It just very much is, this little thing is going in a space that you never go near. Right from the start, anybody that we've ever brought in here, immediately they were comfortable with it on there, that they weren't having to adjust how they were playing because of the way that some cable goes. It's the way that you have it mounted in there. Nothing, the cable doesn't go over their arm. It doesn't go through their hand in any particular way. It's just immediately comfort out of the way. There's no sound coming from it, as he says, of cables clanking or anything like that. It's just very much, it's something that you can put on $1 million instrument and nobody's going to go, whoa, you're touching my thing. Yes, it's fine.
One of the other cool things is the mic doesn't have any sort of mounting bracket itself. So should you be using some other mic and your mounting bracket breaks, now your mic's useless.
one of the most important things of being a musician is being in control of your sound. As a guitar player, you have your guitar that you love, you have your pedal board, you have your amp, you have all of these things, and that's your sound. So when you go to a session, you show up knowing what you're going to sound like. As a string player, if you just show up to a session and it can be mic'd any way you want. As a horn player, it can be mic'd any way you want. You can use any microphone. So the REMIC is something that's just affordable, that you know exactly what you are going to sound like. You can go to a multi-million-dollar studio, or you can go to somebody's bedroom studio, and you know as the player exactly how you're going to sound. It's so transparent of your own playing. You can show up and say, this is me. Same way that a vocalist shows up and is like, this is the vocal mic that I like to use. There's not often studios that just have dedicated orchestral mics of any kind, unless you're going to massive studios. So you're really at the mercy of the engineer constantly. And, as a player, that doesn't always instill confidence of like, yeah, man, I don't know what I'm going to sound like at the end of the day. Like, a REMIC is something that you can get and you can show up and just be consistent. It can be a selling point for you as a musician that I can come here. Producers don't have, if the producer doesn't have a mic, he or she may not want to actually use a live player. They might want to use a string library because they know what it's going to sound like. Well, for very limited money, if the string player already has their own mic, you can hire that person. They can come in and you just get them for one price. This is what we're going to sound like. This is going to sound great. Trust me, I'm in control of my sound. I know what's going on.
There is a trend within at least the recording industry in that this industry's kind of become a bit of a cottage industry again. There are still the major studios, but a lot of people work out of their homes or a small studio. And one of the nice things about the REMIC is you don't have to worry so much about the space that you are in that they work well within myriad different acoustic environments. So the room is not going to be as big of an issue for a player as it would be with using, any other type of microphone, whereby the environment is the crucial factor. In this one, the quality of your instrument and your playing is the factor that is going to get you your sound.
Yeah, you can definitely, for what it would cost to go to a massive studio in LA here for a day, you could just buy your own set of, like, you guys have the quartet mics for the string quartet. Like, if you wanted to record that and go to a studio, that's going to cost you a lot of money, and you're going to have an engineer, and the environment's very important. And I mean, there's no knocking what that sounds like. That's how orchestra has always been recorded. But I think that people are in smaller studios, they don't see a way that they can basically translate that to their studio. For the price of going to this major studio for a day, you can buy a quartet of mics and you can record in your bedroom. You can record in your garage or your kitchen or your small home studio. And then you have the mics, and then you could do it again. And you don't have to keep spending this money. It pays for itself within one session of going to a large studio.
Yeah, and it's great for people like us. We have a studio here in LA. It's good sized. We can fit a fair amount of people in our live room here. But we don't need to worry about, how this is gonna, what is this whole ensemble going to sound like in the room, because we have individual control over each piece, which is great. So we know how it's going to sound every time. Also, what's really nice, and a session that we just did, the composer really liked how he can be able to manually automate and ride each individual instrument to poke it out at the proper time and place in the track. When you are on nothing but room mics, if you want to bring out a violin, you can't do that. That person has to have a mic on them
Yeah, they have to play louder. You have to get more takes to try to get exactly what you need. You have to be planning so far ahead with it. As well, another thing that we came across, we just did an 8-piece string session in here right before this, and everything was being stacked on top of each other and turning into a full orchestra. And one of the cool things about having the remics on each player is that we only had one person playing bass. So all of the low end, if you are miking in traditional settings, all the low end is coming from one part of the room. So you can sort of slide around panning a little bit, but it's not as precise. You start to get weird mixing of things. And this is really, with each take, what the producer is going to go in and do is he's just going to be panning things around exactly where he needs it. And there's so much rejection in these mics that it's just picking up that instrument. He can fly things around wherever he wants. And he's like, oh, I need 4 basses on the left and 4 on the right. Great, do 8 takes with the ensemble. You don't have to do just bass, which is what typically happens. Track 8 of just the bass, and then you can fly them around. Dude, we had the whole ensemble going. Fly everybody around wherever you want. You get even spacing. It sounds massive.
One of the other things I like is these mics, they have a sound that is familiar to the player, but there's this cool little halo of ambience around it. In that it doesn't sound like a pickup, which is funny because a lot of the players thought it was some sort of pickup, but it's not. It doesn't have that weird, yucky, direct sound to it. There's a little halo of ambience around it. Not enough to really bleed too much, but enough in that you get a sense of space around the instrument, which is really interesting. But it's not like it's completely interacting with the environment it's in, to the point where it's going to change your sound from location to location.
Yeah, it seems like even in messing around with these in really in different sort of environments, messing around with these in really dead spaces, that ambience is still there. And messing around in more lively settings, that ambience is still there. So there's something that it's picking up off of the instrument itself, that it's getting the actual warmth of when you put your head near
air between.
Yeah, it's like when you put your head near an acoustic guitar, it sounds totally different than being 3 feet away from it, and it's somehow picking up a little bit of that energy that's right near it. So it's not dry and stale and just directly harsh in your face of a sound. It's something that it has a glow and an air
there's a
to
little
it.
halo around it.
Yeah. And as well, another thing that we were talking about when we were doing all kinds of mic shootouts with this is just how bright it is. And, Justin does a ton of mixing as well. And so it's like there's this brightness that's really good, that's helpful. Like both of us have mixed orchestral sessions and we get stuck with, man, there's no more top end. There's nothing that you can do to get that back without getting the scrape of the strings or just the shuffling of people's feet and all of these unwanted sounds that are in there. And having all this, you were saying it's so full spectrum of the sound.
You can pick and choose what you want to use and not use, which is really nice. Yeah,
and the brightness to it is, I think that relates to the air of it, that the brightness is such it's a pleasant brightness. It's not harsh. It's just the high end is there, and all of the string intonation is there.
We shot out. We did a shootout between the REMICs and some of the other companies out there that make a clip-on microphone for a lot of these orchestral instruments and things like that. And when we A/B'd between the two, it was like the other mics had a thick blanket over it.
Yeah, it was.
It seemed muffled and dark.
Yeah, it was very much something that might be. It might be the thing that it might be the sound that you're going for, but it's not always the best sound to start with because you can't get any of that brightness back. So if you're wanting to try to blend things in, it's always nicer to have that top end and be able
Yeah.
to roll it off a little bit than to be like, it's too dull. I don't, that's
Trying to
the
get
starting
that,
point.
yeah, trying to get that brightness back. You're gonna have to EQ that in and amplify those frequencies, and then, I mean, that's just becomes simple gain staging at that point where you're adding more gain to the top end, so you're gonna get more hiss, more noise, more rosin sound on the instrument.
Yeah.
You're gonna pick up people's breathing. We don't have that problem with the remics.
And again, it's just not what that dull sound is just not what orchestral instruments sound like. When you stand in a room with an orchestra, it's incredible, just the fullness of the sound and the richness and all this brightness. And it's, why would you want to have a microphone that doesn't portray that right from the start and be like, okay, cool, wow, that's exactly how an orchestra sounds. Now I can sculpt it if I need it to sit in my mix a certain way, but why would I want to start with going, okay, that's a compromised sound from the beginning? This is just like, it's like sitting next to the player. I mean, even being a few feet away from a violin or being a few feet away from a trumpet or whatever, it sounds different from being like, it's like you're leaning over their shoulder and really hearing what they're hearing and how they're playing it. And I think that you just get that accuracy that you're not getting anywhere else with any other combination of mics or anything. There's just not this accuracy and this intimacy from it of, we had a player come in a couple weeks ago that had never used the REMIC, and he's just like, dude, I just record with it, but have it off because I know my sound. I know what I sound like going through microphones. Let me do what I'm familiar with. And he was doing a thing where he was stacking himself into a full orchestra. And so he started working, and then he was just like, came in to listen to it, and we're like, hey, so here's what the REMIC is doing. And he goes, wait a minute, that's what I'm hearing. Like that's me in the other room. I want to hear that now. And went back in and was like, oh wow, this is how I sound. This is cool. I can work with this. I'm not afraid of the microphone at this point, which goes back to earlier about players being able to own this for themselves and own their sound and be able to show up and be like, this is what I sound like. Here's my microphone. Just plug into this. Doesn't matter what preamp you use. Just give me something really transparent. This is what I sound like. And I can work from there. You're not, as a player and as the producer and as the engineer, you're not working from a compromised sound right from the start.